Okay, data is getting very, very critical for any business to run, right? And when we talk about like a business, what are some of the key like facets that are important for any business? To me, there are three things, right? One is your top line, which is your revenue. Second is like the bottom line, which is the net margin. And of course, the brand in terms of what are the customers, like brand experience and so on and so forth. Those are some of the three elements which any business would be focusing on at a high level. So like in terms of data and its like importance to kind of illustrate that, I want to share few metrics in here. As you can see in the screen, just in like in the last 1 year, the net incremental revenue that were just added by leveraging just the real-time data, not just the like existing or data at rest, but just the real-time data, that like organizations are able to like garner roughly $2.6 trillion, right? And this is coming from like the Center of Economics and Business Research inputs. So huge impact on how you are going to leverage data in terms of your top line. At the same time, even on the bottom line, as per some of the like a McKinsey report, a recent McKinsey report, there has been a detailed analysis by which at an average, organizations can like gain up to a 60% like efficiency in terms of operating margin. So again, how like you are leveraging the data and be able to create that value on the margin, that clearly indicates that. And on the similar report with McKinsey on the customer engagement as well, as you can see, there is a clear study that has happened by which it has been noted that any data-driven companies and data-informed companies, I would say, are likely to acquire customers 23 times more than somebody who doesn't, right? Which is phenomenal. So some of these like metrics clearly illustrate the power of data and how important data is for any organization, any business of any size and shape, right? To illustrate this further, I also want to share some like metrics in terms of what are the businesses or organizations doing, because those are some of the leading indicators, right? So number one, I want to share that, and again, this doesn't come in as a surprise to any of you here. Almost 97.2% of companies and organizations across the globe are investing on big data and AI, right? And not just that, of course, when we talk about data, security is extremely important element when we talk about it. We cannot talk without security. And there has been a 51% increase in investment actually in securing the data as well. So it is going a lot like side by side. While there is a lot of investment happening in like on the big data and AI, but there is also like a good amount of investment on securing the data as well. So this is one of the leading indicator to say we are not just talking about data is important, but how different organizations are recognizing that and already actioning on that part, right? On the other side, of course, it's not just about platforms and product. It is also important how organizations develop, nurture the talent, and that is also a good like indicator of which direction organizations are going towards. So that's where the other metric that you see here, that is almost 96% of organizations are looking to hire based on big data skills. That's again a huge like a leading indicator towards like where the organizations are going towards, right? So all these things clearly like inform us the importance of data across various facets. But like while we talk about data management, like is it easy? Absolutely not, right? So doing data management is not easy. I think there is a hand raised. Is there a question?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So building this data platforms is not easy. And not just that, like managing the data is not easy. Let me explain this through the 4 V's. The V's being volume, velocity, variety, and veracity, right? So let me talk about volume first. So as you can see the graph in here, it is expected the amount of data that we're going to have globally by 2025 is going to be roughly 180 zettabytes. To give you a perspective, a zettabyte has 21 zeros in it, right? It is huge. And like in another like 1 or 2 years, we are already roughly around, like, I think 120 zettabytes. We are going to go till 180 zettabytes. But it's not just about the volume. It's about the rate in which the data is getting generated. As you can see here, the roughly like 90% of world's data has got created in the last 2 years. So we are really like growing the data pretty fast. So that is going to be a key consideration, both in terms of volume as well as the rate of like data that is getting created, plays a huge role in how we are going to manage the data. The third one is variety. Again, this is again an extremely important one. As you can see here, on an average, like a large organization, large enterprise has like a roughly 400 different sources by which data is getting generated. However, this number can only go up, especially because, as you all know, like especially in the last decades, all organizations are going towards digitizing and doing digital transformation of their business themselves. Because of which, of course, there is a higher probability or higher opportunity of even capturing the data, which was not available earlier. And secondly, as you all know, there is a huge proliferation of data sources, especially with IoTs coming into play. We are getting data anywhere and everywhere, like even at home, like whether even like from the fridge to TV to like whatever that we are doing, that there is data being like accumulated and captured, which are being used for very valuable applications. So the type of sources are proliferating, and the type of data, that is also hugely varied, right? From your real-time streaming data to actually the batch data, whether it's structured information versus unstructured information. There is a lots and lots of types of variety of data that are in play. So managing them is going to be a key consideration, right? And the last but not the least is about the veracity. And again, veracity, I want to talk about two different things. One is the data quality, and second is the data security. And as you can see here, just last year alone, in US, like the cost of poor data quality was around $3.1 trillion, right? So it's not about like having so much of data. We would always, or any organizations need like a sensible data where I can create some insights out of. So there's no like actually like a huge value in like getting data, but how are you going to like find that pin in that haystack, and making sense out of the data is important. And for that, the data quality plays an extremely important role. And the second part of that is the data security, right? And as you can see here, while the data is like getting like increased, there is also this study which talks about almost 90% of the data that enterprises are like capturing or producing would require some level of security. And that level of security could be either from the stringent level of lockdown to confidential to like custodial and compliance and privacy in different shapes of or levels of security that would be needed from data standpoint, right? So and this is phenomenal, right? Like almost like while we are like talking about such a huge volume, the kind of data and how much of those data needs to be protected is also is going to be important, right? And what if we don't do that, like we don't secure those data properly? It leads into 5 critical imperatives, right? And again, this group would definitely like know much about it. Number one is financial loss, especially due to some of the data breaches, whether it's due to some of the compensation that we may have to do for our end consumers, or legal costs, or actually like for example, some of the operational interruptions that might have happened because of the data breaches. So clearly, one of the first impact by not securing the data is going to be like financial loss. Second, actually, like, okay, on that note, I want to share one other thing. Again, I was just going through a recent study, like 2023 study, wherein there was a mention about roughly like a $4.45 million on an average, that has been liability created for in each of the data breach in 2023 alone, which is roughly like 2.3% higher than what was there in the last year. So with more data and more advancement in technologies, the opportunity to like do the breach that is also increasing. So it becomes extremely important there. Now, talking about reputational impact, again, like, no, goes without saying, when there is a data breach, like there is a study even says that almost 1/3 of customers who like are part of a particular organization which has seen like a data breach don't come again. So which is huge, right? So reputational is again an extremely important element, which is an outcome of any data breach that happens. And third is actually the interruption to the regular business as usual operations, just because where we want to spend in times of spending time to find the breach as well as in remediating them. So during that process, there would be interruptions in the regular BAU operations, right? So that also amounts to like a huge impact from the data breach. And fourth, of course, there is a legal imperative, especially when there is a like a compliance issue involved, and also if there is a specific customer what do you say like privacy laws and so on and so forth that's going to come into play, there is a impact from legal as well from the organizations. And last but not the least, I would like to talk about the second order impact as well. So what do I mean by that? So when there is a data breach, of course, like the data has got shared to other parties. So how are they going to use that data for further like damage, especially if there is a sensitive data, especially around customer data, right? Or a credit card data. So how that information is like misused and can create further like a domino effect in terms of the impact based on that data breach. So I'm spending I want to emphasize here around the veracity part of it. So from the data management standpoint, veracity, again, extremely important element, especially from security standpoint. And with the rest of the other V's I just mentioned, this also makes it even more important for us to have a key consideration while we talk about like data platform to manage the data effectively. With that said, so like of course I kind of created a morbid picture in terms of some of the key challenges in managing the data, but there are opportunities actually in managing the data for creating a very positive effect as well, right? That is where I want to talk about the other two V's, the fifth V and the sixth V as well. The fifth V is visualization. Okay, so what do I really mean by here, right? So while we have this data, as we all know, like we all know, like in terms of our Puranas or like Ramayans and Mahabharats, the best form of information that is getting shared is always like verbal or visual, right? It's a good storytelling. So when you have huge amount of data, it is also highly imperative to use the data to present the information in a very consumable form through better visualization, so that the stakeholders can understand the information better and get the right insights, which is where the visualization platform as a area is also extremely important and a key consideration while doing the data management, right? So that like, okay, how can I best organize my data and be able to present it? That's going to be a very critical information. The second opportunity, also, though it's not really a V, but the wisdom with a V, is about the like opportunity of leveraging this data for like building the artificial intelligence and machine learning models. As you can very well see here, while the data is like increasing exponentially, at the same time in the last 2 decades, we have seen a significant like improvement in terms of the compute power or processing power. As we all know, NVIDIA is a leader in that area. where they are building like tremendously powerful GPUs, which are being leveraged for really huge amount of compute power. At the same time, in terms of the storage cost has also significantly reduced. So these are all like great things, and we are like getting to that, what we call it, like all stars aligned. So we are getting to that sweet spot wherein we could really like leverage that humongous data that we have at our disposal and create like a good AI and ML mature models to drive insights and drive real value out of that kind of data. So those are some of the key six like V's. Just I want to highlight in terms of 4 challenges and 2 potential opportunities, which like would be really, really useful for, or rather to be considered while we talk about any data management. Now, based on that, like how do we build these data platforms to address these key considerations on data management? So a data platform, as you can see here, has these key layers. Starting at the bottom, right from the data sources, wherein, as we spoke earlier, there's going to be a variety of data that's going to come in different shapes and form under a different timeline. The first layer for a data platform is able to ingest that data from these data sources and collect it like and start storing them in a raw format, right? So then this could be like an ETLs or ELTs. And also there are, again, depends on whether I'm talking about or I'm handling a real-time data versus a batch data. Like there are different technologies that could be leveraged to like ingest this information, right? And second is, once I get this data in the raw format, like especially when there is going to be a like a unstructured data. I hope like everybody understands structured and unstructured. So just to quickly talk about structured data I'm talking about is purely a transactional or operational information like order details or product details and so on and so forth. And unstructured data could be like a social media comment or a product review. So those are like going to be your unstructured data. So like now getting them and then storing them is going to be the second capability that a data platform should entail, right? And the third part, what we call it, is that like the transformation layer, wherein, okay, hey, I'm using these like the raw data which I'm collecting across multiple sources. How do I actually cleanse them and create a meaningful metric out of it, right? In what we call it like a medallion architecture, where we say like bronze, silver, and gold. Any data that is coming in raw, that is like that's called the bronze layer. With that bronze layer, you build and kind of like make a clear connection across different information to make a very clear metric. As an example, like for example, sales in a digital channel or sales in a store channel, that is a kind of a metric. So how do we clearly like identify that metric? For that, we need to cleanse the data as well as clearly like aggregate that information. And for that, we would also need the transformation. That is your third layer. The topmost layer is the data consumption layer, wherein either the gold layer or the metrics that has been built on top of the data that we have accrued, there could be different data products which are primarily used for building canned reports or like self-serve analytics, going and like figuring out so that like I can strategize and so on and so forth. That is where like it could be leveraged to visualize in terms of bar charts or like specific insight and so on and so forth. The other form of consumption could be like building models on top of that metrics and data, just to create like additional insights, as well as for doing like kind of a what if analysis, what do you call it, simulation, right? Hey, when I'm going to open a new store, what would that like the total supply chain would look like? So those are some of the things that could be done in terms of your consumption layer. So these are the 4 key layers that entails a typical data platform. Now there is also this 5th layer, which is more of a horizontal, which is going to be which is going to play a very extremely critical role, which is the cataloging of all the data and governing that data, right? So which is where the elements of, okay, build like creating a certified definition of a data metric, so that across enterprise, when I talk about hey, there is a sales metric on a digital channel. Everybody in an organization of 4,000 associates, everybody uses the same metric, and it's not, data is not consumed in a siloed fashion. So that is one of the elements. Similarly, building the data security and putting together a right governance in terms of access controls and authentication, that also is going to be an extremely critical role, and that falls under the data governance, right? So with that kind of those 5 layers, you can now easily understand those the 6 V's I just spoke about, purely from the first layer, data sources, to like the data ingestion. That's where the variety of data needs to be a key consideration, so that we have the right patterns of pipelines, data pipelines that are built, so that the different kinds of data that can be handled, different variety of data that can be handled. And across the layer 1, 2, 3 is where we need to consider the volume and velocity, because that's where we are going to have petabytes, at least in given a global organization. Like there could be petabytes of data coming in and at a huge pace. How much I'm going to store? What is the cost implications of storing it? What is the processing time and the capacity or resource capacity that I need to kind of build it, as well as in terms of how much compute I need to build to transform and build the right metrics. And from the veracity standpoint is where, like I spoke about, those data catalog and governance, wherein building the right quality through certification, as well as building the right security controls to ensure all the data are in place. And the last 2 V's being visualize and wisdom, as I mentioned earlier, those primarily are from the consuming standpoint. So at a broad level, these are some of the key layers that encompass building any data platform for effective management of the data. Now, is it sufficient to just go ahead and build a platform like this? This is where I want to talk about. No matter how you effectively build a platform, it cannot be successful if it doesn't yield the right intended value, right? That is the key here, and which is where I want to introduce about the 7th V, right? Which is value. And this is where the product lens comes into play. So far I was talking about little technical details in terms of how a typical data platform needs to be built, and what are the key components that belong to it. But to really make it effective, the 7th V is the key ingredient to make it effective. Okay, so now let's talk about what is value in the context of data platforms. The value can be primarily twofold. One is value for the business or the organization or the enterprise. The second is the value for the end consumer. So data plays a role in both these things. How does it happen? Let's talk about how the value is created for business. As you can see in the left here, the value could be in various shapes and forms, right from especially when I look at the customer data and their behavior. Hey, where did they purchase? What kind of demographies that their customer is coming from? And what channel they are going for. Based on that, I can, as an organization, come up with a customer strategy on what kind of segments I need to go after, depending on my business model. The data plays a critical role in strategizing my customer strategy. Similarly, it also plays a very critical role in doing the strategy for 4P. I believe many of you would be aware of what the 4P is. 4P is nothing but your a price, place, promotion, and a location, essentially, right? So those are something going to be the key elements of any merchandising. Whether I'm when I'm going to do a pricing, what kind of pricing I need to have for a given particular product, for and what product I need to sell, and within that product what price I need to have, and then do I need to apply any promotion, and which place or which channel I need to sell. So all these information I would be able to derive based on the insights from the data that I would have. Similarly, on the operations side, again, on the operations side, data plays an extremely important role. To give a simple example, okay, I want to improve my efficiency of my supply chain, or instead of a product, when I make an order in Amazon, it takes 2 days for me to get it. Can I make it reach the customer in 1 day? How can I do that? right? So potentially we can look at the data to figure out in terms of like where exactly the product is in terms of from which manufacturer it's coming from, which data warehouse it is actually it is going into, and then what is the distance of the customer. So if you are able to get analyze that in terms of the various data, we could bring in optimization to improve that operations, right? So again, data plays a very, very critical role in doing that. So similarly, plays a critical role from productivity and also in innovation. Now, let's talk about the value it creates for our consumers, end consumers, right? So it is kind of go side by side, right? The moment I exactly know which customer I need to target, obviously I can provide the most relevant information or relevant product and right prices to my consumer. So think of it like a hyper personalized hyper personalization that can be offered to the customers, which actually facilitates them to take decisions, their shopping decisions, much faster, right? Again, I'm taking a lot of example from retail as I am broadly from the retail background, but this is applicable across any industries, right? So similarly, there are also huge benefits that could be offered by understanding our customer better through the lens of data, by providing them the right emotional benefits, the right experience for them, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the key in terms of how we can create this end value through these data platforms, because without this, it is like yet another platform which is not going to create add a much value. So what are the things that are very, very critical from this perspective in applying this product lens, right? Like three things are extremely important. One is there is a absolute need of understanding the value for who is going to get the value, which is where it always needs to be a why led. We need to understand why am I building this platform, right? So that okay, who is going to use it? What is the benefit that they are going to get? That is something which we always need to understand. Second is about how quickly I can drive insights to the consumers in terms of speed to market as well as speed to insights, right? And third is also more about the scale. When I'm going to talk about scale, of course, okay, how many how can I scale building many more products without having an implication on the quality, on for that matter even some of the security elements and some of the non-functional capabilities that needs to be taken into consideration. So those are some of the key elements that would be required while we talk about the seventh V, which is the value. With that being said, let's delve deeper.
So,
Okay.
we have a question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so you can check that QA part from Apeksha. You want to read it out, or
Let me see if I'm able to see the. I don't see the question here though.
a Q&A session? There is a question from Apeksha. Yeah,
Okay. Oh, there's a okay. There's a
yeah,
Q&A.
yeah,
Okay, let me read out the question here.
yeah.
So organizations are already using AI and ML to automate data governance. Any areas where you see if you can significantly add value, or any frequent use cases you have recently seen? Actually, you know what? To be honest, in my view, the data governance from AI and ML is very, very nascent in nature. I don't think it's at the very early part of evolution, right? Because as you all know, one of the key challenges that we have in the AI and ML capability is the explainability, as well as in terms of being responsible, these two elements, right? And there is a lot of work happening as we speak, right, from all the stalwarts, right, from Microsoft to Google to so many other other startups as well. But we are at a little nascent stage as we speak in terms of how much governance that we can do. But at a broad level, what I could say is that few things that we are looking to do, at least based on whatever I have seen, right? One is for starters, we are ensuring especially in a larger organization, like we want to ensure that, like, okay, there is not much of a duplicateness in terms of like different use cases that is being looked at, right? We want to look at like what exactly that we could do. Second is we also want to look at, okay, what are the use cases which is going to yield the right like ROI that we are going to get out of, right? And third also is in terms of what is the data I'm leveraging upon to build some of those capabilities, as I was mentioning earlier. And this is where like the certification of the data is also extremely important, so that like, okay, we are not building models like on any data. We are building models on data which are really like we all know that if everything is extremely right and certified and so on and so forth, right? So those are some of the initial things, but there is a huge opportunity like in this area specifically, especially on explainability, wherein, okay, when if a particular model has determined a certain course, why it did that decision, why did it to take that decision, based on what kind of inputs, giving that lineage or traceability by so that like we are able to absolutely explain the what do you say, the decisions that a model has taken, as well as in terms of being responsible in terms of like reducing any biases for that matter, whether it's gender bias or a cultural bias or like a confirmation bias, like all those things, how can we kind of like reduce so that the models that we build are kind of in a what do you say, in a much responsible manner. Again, these are all like early days. I would think that's especially I'm looking forward personally to see a good what do you say, development on these areas in this year as well as in the near future. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, Vasant. Yeah, you can move ahead. No more question.
Perfect. All right, so like actually just okay. Okay. So I just talked about this like 7 V's, right? So now let's quickly delve deeper into how do we go about actually building these data platforms and like as well as architecting that, right? So here, like primarily, I would like to talk about like these 3 layers, right? First, in line with whatever I spoke earlier as well, the topmost that you can see is an extremely important part to understand the why and who of whatever that we are building, right? So that should be the first thing we will want to do. Second is to understand the what and how, with the focus on speed, scale, security, and quality. And third is organizing the not just the program but also the organization in itself, because it also involves a lot of change management. I'll talk about it in a bit. That's also an extremely important element in terms of how well we organize ourselves as well as the program for building some data platforms like this, and what should be the right operating model. So let's go and slice and dice each of these layers one by one and see like how do we go about doing it, and share my perspective based on my past experience. Let's start with the first one, which is understanding the why and who with the focus on value. So here there are few elements that needs to be considered here, right? The first and foremost is about, before we start building these data platforms, is to understand the broader business goals, right? As an organization, any organization would have like the key goals, whether it's being like a specific top line targets or a specific margin targets, or for that matter even it could be like a brand experience targets, right? So like first and foremost is to understand what are the broader business goals, even like for example whether I'm talking about like an year or like for the foreseeable next to 3 to 5 years, for which the data platform that we are looking to build is going to play a critical role. So understanding from the executive leadership is extremely important, and understanding that the like what is our goal is extremely important. With that in mind, like trying to understand the various drivers of those business outcomes, right? So based on like, okay, what kind of data products that we need to build which will like move the needle on those broader business goals, whether it's revenue or cost, right? Or like, do we need to, like, what kind of what do you say, the autonomy that we are going to give to the business stakeholders, whether do you want to give them the canned reports, or do you want to give them like a self-serve capability wherein they could go and do a real-time check, and what kind of levels of security am I going to give? Like for executives, like what kind of like access that needs to be available, versus what for the analysts or data scientists, what is that I'm going to offer? So some of those, like it's extremely important to understand those, that kind of a broader view, my like my business goals and some of my key drivers. Now with that, the second logical element is to understand, like what are, like who are your key stakeholders, who are we really solving this for, like what are the various data products I'm going to build on this platform, which will solve for like what kind of stakeholders, right? At a broad level, I would say like the stakeholders can belong to three different groups. One is executives, like business analysts and operators. Second is more like a technologists, who are mostly like a data or BI analyst, business intelligence analyst, and data scientists. And third is product analyst. What do these real like personas entail? Let's talk about the executives and business analysts and operators, right? So these are the persona who are going to be looking out for, maybe like, okay, I want to access something in mobile on the go. I'm going to look at it on a day in day out basis, but I'm not like a very like what do you say, I may not be a really data person. I'm not going to run an SQL to pull the data and so on and so forth. I want something very clearly articulated, visualized in terms of the key summary inputs, based on which I can either make a decision for a day-to-day operations, as well as in terms of take decisions in terms of broader strategy, right? So, and within this itself, again, there can be different layers where it, like executive, who is just going to be looking at a completely rolled up information and take like immediate decisions, or be able to question like a specific trend or whatever that they are seeing. Whereas like a business analyst or somebody who may have little bit more access to the data, but at the same time do not have technical abilities, but are very, very good in terms of strategy, who can interpret data and be able to visualize. The second persona is like going to be like in terms of either data analysts or data scientists, who are more tech savvy and who can go into the data ecosystem, like pull in queries, clean up the data, prepare the data, run like build models, like run specific queries to ensure that they are able to get the right insights and so on and so forth, right? And the third persona is going to be more like a product analyst, who are like, okay, like if I'm running a digital what do you say .com business, right? So like as a owner of the .com business, I would want to know like, okay, how my product, which is my digital product, is performing on a day-to-day basis. What are customers doing? What are the additional features that I need to build so that like I can improve my what do you say, conversion and so on and so forth. So the product analyst is kind of somewhere in between a business a stakeholder and a data analyst stakeholder, who are like little tech savvy but not very deep insights. So that's the kind of a persona that you're looking at. So it is, when we are starting to build like the data platform, it's also important like whom are we building this for, like and if I'm going to support like a specific things, the kind of consideration that we are going to have will be very different when you talk about different persona groups. Now, the third element is going to be in terms of like gaining the sponsorship and defining the like OKRs, right? So we spoke about the broader business goals, whether it's revenue, cost, or experience. Now, while we also understand whom we are building for, typically in a larger organization, it's important to gain that sponsorship so that you have the right budget allocated, so that we can go after what investment that we need to do, whether I want to build, I'm going to buy something from the market, and so on and so forth. So that alignment in terms of sponsorship, whom I'm going to start building, because when we are building this, it is not going to happen overnight. It's a journey for us to build that. So the support of the business stakeholders is going to be, and as a matter of fact, executive business stakeholders is extremely important to provide us the right sponsorship. While doing so, it's also like there is an imperative to translate that business outcomes that we spoke about earlier into very tangible like objectives and key results. So what do you call it, OKRs, right? And these objectives and key results could be different for different part of the organization, right? So for example, a marketing business unit will have a certain like objective and key results. At the same time, your the store or digital business unit may have a different objective and key result, as long as they are all rolling up to the broader business goals. But when we are going to build a like data platform, it is also important to translate that broader like Uber business goals into this individual domain level objectives and key results, so that there is sufficient clarity or granularity in terms of what we got to like build and what are the key considerations to build this. To give an example, right? Let's say that, okay, purely for the persona being a business operator, right? I want to, on a day-to-day basis, look at in terms of how many what say products are sitting outside my store to be brought inside the store, basically sitting in the yard and bringing it to the store, right? So typically for that operational work, this happens when the truck comes in a specific time in the morning, as well as leaves certain time during the day, right? So it is also important, because of that consideration, all the insights in terms of what products have come to which store, what are sitting outside versus what are sitting inside, which product has higher inventory, lower inventory, that information should be available for the person who is managing the yard in a store by the morning, by certain time in the morning. The moment that SLA is not met, of course, the person's whole day job is going to be completely like obstructed, right? So that when we are building the data platform, again, going back to the 4 V's that we spoke about here, the velocity of what data comes in plays a critical role in this case. That kind of gets translated, that consideration comes into play based on that objective here. For example, like a store yard management team, hey, I would want to ensure that my data and my reports are available by certain time of the day in a given day, right? So that's where it's important to like get the objectives clearly from our stakeholders as well. Now, with that in play, the next key element is in terms of understanding the broader domain.
Vasant, one question is there
Sure.
anonymously. The question about OKRs, I think it is objective and key result.
Yep.
Since CISO is a part of board, so you mentioned about top-down approach. So the objective from CISO can be a part of the business OKRs, or is it be a different OKRs?
As well, because again, it's not like any, at the end of the day, I'm like I would expect the CIO anyway is going to be part of the broader executive leadership. So any broader business goals that are going to come in, that gets translated into each of the executive what do you say, stakeholders as well, right? And give a very simple example, and we touched upon earlier when we talk about security standpoint, right? It has its impact on revenue as well as cost, and cost specifically, right? Especially in terms of what is the liability I'm going to have, basically in terms of cost avoidance as well as in terms of cost savings, right? So if the broader goal is going to be, hey, I'm going to have my like current year, my goal is to go have like a 15% operating margin, like that gets translated into each of these different parts of the organization, right? And that comes into say, okay, for example, a merchandising team, they could have a like a goal to say, for like 80% of your merchandising, I want the operating costs or operating margin to be like probably what do you say 10% of sort. Similarly, on the SG&A standpoint, from security liability, hey, this is the broader thing that we can do, and like whether it could be purely in terms of the cost dollars as well as, okay, number of incidents or data breaches that I'm going to can cater for, right? So it definitely ties up to the broader business goals. And from security standpoint also, the OKRs is extremely critical, and that flows in as a key input while we are building to build the data platforms.
Okay, so you mean that the CISO can own the OKRs, correct?
Absolutely. Okay. And they are going to be a key stakeholder, right? Like, because that's what I was mentioning earlier. When we are building an enterprise data platform, the whole like value chain comes into play. When I say the whole value chain, again, I'm taking an example of a retail value chain here, right from like merchandising to like marketing to sales, which is like your stores or digital. Then your inbound supply chain, outbound supply chain, then post order, which is your contact center, and so on and so forth. These are your broader verticals. The horizontals will be your finance organization, the security organization, then your infra organization. So those are, and of course the tech organization as well. All these are very, very key stakeholders in determining in terms of what kind of the data that they are going to use. Because when you talk about data platform, that is at the, especially in the current, it is at the center of any business. It's an extremely critical element. So all stakeholders are involved in this.
Thanks, Vasant, for a nice explanation. Yeah, we can move ahead.
Perfect. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about, so like we spoke about, okay, hey, there's an opportunity, there's a need to build, like understand the business goals and stakeholders and the OKRs. The next thing is also need to understand our individual domains, right? So because that is also going to be extremely important, again, going back to my 4Vs there, in terms of like the variety of data we spoke about, it is important to know what kind of data I'm coming and how am I going to store there, right? Again, taking retail as an example, it is extremely important to my earlier point as well. Okay, if I'm building an enterprise data platform, what are the types of data I'm talking about, right? So for example, when I talk about merchandising, like a business unit, there, what are the key data entities there? There's going to be a product information, important, pricing, promotion, like those are some of the critical elements that are going to be there. When I'm talking about marketing, customer data is going to be a very, very critical information there. When I'm talking about sales, that's where the order details and service details, those are the things that are going to be critical. So understanding the next level of, in terms of what are the BUs that entails and what are the key entities that are involved within those domains by the industry type that we are on is important, so that we can organize the data in that fashion, right? So that, okay, hey, all the customer data goes and stays in here, so that tomorrow, when again, from security standpoint as well, we can define the right rules on, in terms of ring fencing the right data. For example, the level of security that you need for a financial data versus a customer data is going to be different from what I'm going to store like a product reviews information, or what do you say, like a course, or so on and so forth, or chat information, right? So it is also important to go next level to figuring out in terms of, okay, what kind of data I'm going to get, which I need to manage for my platform, so that like, and for that, a good domain understanding is also important. Second is also like in terms of what kind of use cases, which is, as I was mentioning earlier, the use case could be as simple as, okay, you know what, depending on the type of organization we are working with, there may be organizations which say like, okay, my business stakeholders are not savvy in terms of doing like their own self-serve analytics and so on and so forth. You always give me like canned reports, which I can see every day morning, right? That is one type of a use case. The second kind of use case could be like, okay, no, like we all want like to be very savvy and day in, day out, like we have the right skill set to go into the data, like keep analyzing them and keep improving it on a real-time basis. That is a different kind of an use case. The third kind of an use case could be like, okay, hey, I have the right infrastructure for AI and ML models to come and run on my data and then mine the information and provide me as like key inferences, right? These are kinds of different kinds of use cases that are possible. So it's important to come to the board to understand, while when I know the business goals and my OKRs, also figuring out by individual like domains and use cases, what is the like a broad brush of like use cases I got to support through my data platform. That is extremely important for us to understand. Now, with that said, let's talk about the second layer, which is going to be in terms of, okay, how do we now I understand the why and the who. Now let's talk about the what am I going to build based on the information I've got, and how am I going to build, especially with like speed, scale, security, and quality in my key this thing, right? So the first thing is to understand the current state of the tech landscape, right? So the 5 layers I spoke about in terms of this, and especially like as you all know, like when we are going to build a enterprise data platform, many of the organizations are not going to build from scratch, because there will be like, this is a data is not something new. Organizations have invested, like built some kinds of legacy platforms already in place. At large, many of the organizations that we talk about in the current context, they will only be modernizing, unless otherwise it's a completely new startup that's coming up and building completely from the scratch. Most of the organizations entail actually doing the modernization of their existing platforms, right? So from that standpoint, it is also important to understand what are the technologies that are currently being leveraged, so that we can also think about how do we actually like modernize with like minimal friction and at the right timeline, so that we are able to gain the right value, right? So that is going to be one element of it. And when we talk about the current state of the technology like platform, it is also a very important imperative in terms of the talent landscape as well, because I can go and like think about, hey, this is the like I'm going to go and do something on Azure, or I'm going to do it in AWS. But if I don't have people to do that, I would not be able to do that at all, right? So it is also important to assess the current landscape of my talent, as well as like how well I can scale that talent, like through like my own teams or through vendor partners and so on and so forth. What is even the feasibility of it, and what kind of mix I need in terms of the data analytics or data scientists, data engineers, like security engineers, like and product analysts. What is that mix I'm looking for, or network engineers for that matter, right? So that mix is also extremely important to support what I want to do, right? So that will be a like kind of a first consideration. The second consideration, again, a very, very key consideration, is going to be a decision on build versus buy, right? Because definitely when you talk about data platforms, there are a lot of options, rather mature options that are available in the market, as well as like, okay, to do something, want to build completely on premise in your ecosystem as well, right? Of course, there are like a lot of pros and cons in determining that. To give an example, if you want to look at buy, like maybe like an Amazon, or even for that matter, Microsoft or Google. These are three big players who offer like a complete stack of the data platforms, right? At the same time, like how much on-prem that you want to do. That's the key consideration that we need to look at. So what are the factors to be considered while taking that decision in taking this build versus buy? The factors are, number one, in terms of time to market, like how soon that we want to build, how soon we want to create value for our stakeholders, right? Second is in terms of level of customization, like in terms of, okay, how unique is my business, how unique are my needs, whether like doing a buy will cater to that in terms of turnkey solutions, or do I need to do a lot of customizations to make it work for my landscape, my ecosystem, and my stakeholders. So that is a second key consideration. Third is, again, the interoperability of existing ecosystem, because as I mentioned earlier, many of the organizations will only be modernizing. So it's an imperative that my current ecosystem should be able to easily transition over to the new ecosystem, whichever is like least friction. That is something, a key consideration. The fourth, probably one of the important elements in terms of this decision, is the cost and the budget that is incurred, that would be required whether procuring the hardware, building software, building a team to build the software, or building a buying a platform outside, like a cloud solution, and so on and so forth. So that is again going to be a key consideration. The fifth consideration is also about like what is my like long-term goals? What's my broader strategy? How am I going to leverage it? Is it more about like sometimes many of times time to market and the strategic value can be in opposite poles, as we all know. And typically there's a kind of trade-off we need to figure out by considering both these elements. And last but not the least, the data sensitivity. There will be cases wherein we might not want to hold the data to in a third party like system. A good example could be government applications, right? So I don't know how many of you are aware, like Palantir is actually a SaaS data platform that is out there, and US government leverages that, and they have built a completely unique, not unique, like a separate ecosystem just to handle government data versus the rest of the things. So there can be elements based on, okay, what kind of data I'm holding, that can also influence like whether do I need to buy a specific platform, or part of it do I need to build, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the key considerations. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, but at least some of the key considerations while we are looking at a consideration or building a case for build versus buy, right? And at the same time, like not all these factors have equal weightage either, totally depending on the individual organization, their broader goals, going back to my earlier point. And there could be different weightages for these factors, but what I'm calling out is these are some of the key considerations when we look at building this data platform. Now, the third element is all about, okay, whether we take a decision or build or buy.
So wasn't one question on
Sure.
the build versus the buy?
Yep.
In the retail industries, is there any formula or a thumb rule which you recommend? 50% build or a 50% buy? What would be the direction to build versus buy?
No, actually, I'll probably give a typical consulting answer here, right? Probably depends. Depends is the right answer here. I don't think there is at least based on whatever I have seen, like there is a thumb rule. I have seen the complete extreme where organizations want to completely invest more and more on the the build situation, and I have seen okay, on the completely other side of the pendulum where organizations are going buy. But again, that's where the key factors come into play. For example, it's all about the situation at which a particular organization is. If, for example, for them to build, let's take as a customer data platform itself. If an organization is looking at quickly having replacing their legacy platforms, and they want to unlock that value very, very fast, right? Typically they go for, and cost is not a constraint for them, typically they go for a buy option, right? However, if an organization has sufficient resources, sufficient time, and sufficient conviction in terms of the strategy that they are going for and what they want to do, and wanting to hold their destiny on their own hands, those organizations invest more and more on the build solutions, right? But one thing which I would, based on my experience, I have learned, neither extremes are good. It should be the right mix in terms of what you want to do, and at the same time it could also be like what you say, that's where the other factors that as I called out here, right, also are important to take the decision. It is always that case by case decision in my mind.
Okay, is it based on tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 application, or it's across the tier applications?
So it is again, that is again a slice and dice, right? We could do with a tier 1, tier 2 as well, right? Because tier 1, like the considerations are, as you can see here, one is going to be like any impact to the BAU. At the same time, in terms of the criticality or the value unlock is going to be very, very high for that. However, in terms of like a tier 3 applications, maybe the impact is not much. and probably we can afford to probably like build, like have more leeway to kind of build it. But again, I would say that is one of the factors. That is not the only factor.
One for this is from a privacy point of view, when the new privacy laws are coming, is it a build or a buy is better?
So again, based on my experience, I would say build would be preferable, because we'll talk about it in a bit. Because like, how do we anticipate changes? What kind of changes that is there, right? Of course, the products in the market probably like will quickly catch up to support some of these things, and because they are bound to do that, otherwise they will not be able to even like market their particular products. But to offer that flexibility, at least based on my experience, I have seen build works better, because we always have that flexibility. And like giving a simple example I can think of, right? Third-party cookies were required to be deprecated in the recent past, right? So of course, the platforms like Epsilon or LiveRamp, they are like started to move towards like more what do you say, customer ID based solutions instead of cookie based solutions, right? However, like again, that's a kind of a journey for them. However, like if I'm building a martech solution, like it was easier actually to build a martech solution like in terms of in-house, so that we could anticipate some of those changes and be able to make the right changes. Did I help?
Yeah, thanks, Vasant. Good, thank you.
Cool. So with that said, like the next thing which I want to touch upon is also about like how do we, like again touching upon your earlier point also, right? It's also important in terms of how soon I want to create that value, right? Because especially when I'm talking about a build solution, right? It is going to take time. No two ways about it, right? Because it's not easy to build a product from scratch, right? It is going to take quite a bit of time. And that is where it's important to look at what we call it like a minimum valuable product, not as just a minimum viable product. It's important to define that what exactly that is, which is creating the right value for our end customers. It could be something that for a moment, like I could just buy and use it for the initial as a tactical solution, and then while I'm building a long-term solution, that could be a strategy that an organization take. But what is important to understand is agnostic of what platform I'm building, what is the value I'm going to get out of it. That is important. That should drive in terms of some of the decisions as well, right? So number one, like defining the minimum valuable product is important. And post that, it's extremely important to go in a iterative, like incremental cycles, so that we continue to, because especially building a data platform, even a small portion of it within the individual BU, or we are talking about as big as enterprise data platforms, it can be extremely complex. So we have to take baby steps, crawl, walk, run, and slowly and iteratively and steadily build these products and continue to create value, and finally so that we can go ahead and scale them, right? So that is a kind of an approach. Instead of doing a big bang, taking an iterative and incremental approach is going to be like extremely useful. And the next one is going to be that the balance, right? While I spoke about, okay, hey, like time to market is important, but at the same time, like carrying less number of tech debts is also an extremely important element, right? So from that perspective, like as you can see here, there can be different approaches. We need to take an optimized approach, wherein like, okay, we are able to get early value, but it's not so it's not compromising on the scalability nature of it, right? So that like, okay, we don't, as you can see in the red graph in here, so we are not really looking at, okay, like a quick minimum valuable product into the market, but I carried so much of tech debts, I'm not able to build more products on top of it. We don't want that situation. At the same time, we don't want to like keep building, and we are not really realizing the value. But I'm building a perfect solution and like driving it. Rather, we need to look at a good medium there, so that like we are able to go to create value like relatively quicker, at the same time build a solid solution which can scale. So some of the key considerations from that standpoint are building it on more like an open architecture, as well as building what do you say, low maintenance codes, especially around your when building a CI/CD pipelines, as well as building like automation frameworks, as well as finally, last but not the least, in terms of building a solid testing framework by which we are able to identify issues first time, instead of the defects going pretty late in the game, and then finding the issues much later. So it's okay to kind of fail and find the problem quickly, and be anti-fragile, and like make the system much more strengthened, rather than what do you say, like building a very robust system there, right? With that, I want to like talk about the next again important element, which is going to be like, while we talked about some of the functionalities and how I create the like minimum like a valuable product and so on and so forth, the non-functional needs are going to be an extremely important element while we are building the data platforms as well. So what are some of the various facets when we talk about non-functional requirements? Starting with like storage and CPU utilization. So as I was mentioning earlier about the four V's, going back to that, the volume and the kind of velocity that is both for the data that is incoming as well as being consumed is going to be important. So there is a absolute need to understand in terms of what kind of storage I need, and what types of data I'm going to store, as well as what kind of compute power I need to build, so that I can determine my requirements around that. Similarly, on the observability and monitoring standpoint as well, both in terms of both inbound as well as the outbound, like there is an important element of monitoring it for any data losses, as well as in terms of any specific what do you say, interruptions, so that that can be like immediately found and corrected. The third is performance. Again, performance purely again is going to be a factor of what kind of use cases I'm going to have. Especially when I talk about real-time analytics, performance is going to be play a very, very key role. Even on a end of day jobs as well. I was giving an example earlier about morning SLA. There as well, the performance will play a key role. So we got to have a very clear understanding of what kind of performance SLAs that the system needs to offer, so that we can build it and choose the technologies to support that, right? Then comes the data quality and assurance. Again, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, having that right data catalog and governance layer, wherein we are able to like right from monitoring the data and have the right way to reconcile data between two different systems, whether it's source systems to my data platform or from data platform to my consuming systems. How do I ensure the right reconciliation of data happens there, as well as in terms of whether the same metric is being certified and democratized across the organization, instead of different parts of the organization using a siloed data information which may not be really adding up. Then comes the reliability and availability, which is about like when I'm building the platform, how robust I'm going to build, so that, and typically since this is one of the critical systems in an enterprise, how many nines do I want? 99.9% or 99.999% reliability or availability of the systems that needs to be there to ensure that it caters to the right needs. And then comes the cost again, especially in the context of data platform. Cost plays a very, very vital role, especially when you're building your system on premise or in cloud, right? So it can be a very different factor, because if it's going to be on premise, the cost factor is going to be largely more capex and lesser opex, whereas when you go to cloud, it's going to be lesser capex and more opex. So depending on how your organization is structured and what goals are, that also plays a very critical role in terms of determining what we are building. Last but not the least, security. So security will probably like delve a little deeper here in terms of what are the various elements that are primarily required while we talk about like security, right? So first and foremost, of course, like the key element is about the various regulations, which is primarily protecting some of the rights of our end consumers, right? So not just from the like from the purely from organization standpoint, but largely from end consumer standpoint. So for that, of course, there are various regulations, as you all know. I don't need like introduction here, across like different parts of the world, whether it's GDPR or CCPA or CPRA. There are so many legislations and like compliance laws coming into play. However, again, we are still at the earlier stages. For example, in India, like I believe we are again at a very, very early stage. We don't have a still like completely robust regulation in place from the privacy standpoint. So there is a like different types of compliance laws to primarily protect our end consumers. That should be first and foremost consideration from while we are looking at building the data platforms. And again, it can vary with the geography, it can vary with industry, because like probably like the healthcare would have much more stringent like regulations versus like as compared to like retail and so on and so forth. So that the variety of it. But at the same time, typically, as I was earlier mentioning, what is also important from this perspective is the classification of data. Because I was mentioning earlier, in by 2025, almost 90% of the data that we are producing needs to undergo some level of like security, right? So the classification, at least at a high level, are looking at primarily from lockdown kind of data, wherein the data which requires highest security, whether it's being like financial transactions or customer information, or like a healthcare, like my medical details and so on and so forth. That's extremely like critical data information, which requires the most highest level of security. Second is, of course, the confidential data, which is like again one level lower, wherein like, okay, we want to protect some of the information. I can use it, but at the same time, like I can like what do you say? Maybe I'll give an example as customer data to some extent here, because or rather customer marketing data, I would say, right? So in this case, I might be able to get the customer information, but I could anonymize that information and derive some aggregated information in terms of, hey, which channel, whether somebody clicked on an email versus like a social media and so on and so forth. I might not know who that person is, but on an aggregated level, I might probably have some information there. Then comes the other classification, like custodial and private and so on and so forth. So those are some of the types of data that we need to classify whatever that we have got. Based on that, we can put the right like elements to do as part of the broader security architecture. Now, when you talk about the security architecture, like regulation is just the topmost layer, which is protecting our end consumers. We need a multi-layer approach to like cater to like the security needs and security architecture standpoint, right? So here, like I would like to talk about these 6 layers, starting from the hardware to at the end of the day, like on the operation side. Starting with hardware. So basically, when I talk about hardware, this is talk about like where the data is getting stored, right? So it is extremely important to like also bear in mind where is that hardware being manufactured, and how what do you say like what is the integrity of that. So for example, if you take Google, in terms of the like whatever data platforms that they offer for as part of the Google Cloud, they build their own hardwares, and that's one of their key USP to the various industry like organizations, to say, hey, we take the accountability of whatever hardware, the integrity of that hardware. And also in terms of what are you going to have, actually, as a matter of fact, if I remember it right, they have this chip called Titan, right? What it does is that when the hardware boots up, that like chip ensures on Google to ensure that the integrity of the system is in place. There are no external accesses and so on and so forth. And that is part of their kind of USP. So it's important to kind of have that view in terms of wherever I'm storing the data, how what is the integrity of the hardware I'm storing in, whether I'm buying an on-prem data center or I'm going for cloud and so on and so forth. Second is second layer is the software layer on that, which actually like does some of these integrity checks to ensure that, okay, there are no incursions or whatever in any data platform that I'm there. The third part is the actual storage of the data, right? So this is where what we call it data at rest, right? Whether it is like financial data, customer data, all those data that we are talking about, when we are storing it, how can we ensure the secure nature of it? So thumb rule number one, it's absolutely important to encrypt the data. So data that's going to get stored, whatever data that's coming in, that has to be encrypted, like whether it is like there are different CEKs, KEKs, there are different ways that could be encrypted. That is one element of it. The second element for consideration, or even choosing the broader architecture, is how can I like scramble it? When I say that, okay, there is a data set that is coming in, you don't need to just encrypt it and then store it. Rather, break that into multiple clusters, like have them individually encrypted and then store it. So that even if one part of the data is like by any chance decrypted, like we are not really able to like make any sense out of that data. So from the storage standpoint, what is also important is like encryption at data at rest, as well as in terms of how you like kind of break it into multiple clusters and store it. And for example, again, going back to my Google example, Google Cloud offers a very good way to kind of achieve some of these capabilities. Then comes the identity part. So this is where, okay, now I've got like data stored. Now who can access it? So this is where there needs to be a robust access controls policies that should be in place in terms of, okay, whether who can read, who can write, who can create, delete. That's basic. But more importantly, at what levels? Can I do it at a table level, data set level, row level, column level? What is that granularity I might want to offer to what kind of user? So that like anybody who's looking at accessing it, we provide the right this thing. And secondly, the other dimension of identity is also whether what kind of user types, whether you want to give it for like a individual users to access or for an application which is going to automatically access it. And while we do that, other consideration is how frequently you are going to rotate your passwords for the individual accounts, as well as where do we really store the password, whether it's going to be in a vault kind of a or a secret manager, so that like it's kind of absolutely protected in terms of like where the data is stored, so that like whatever passwords that are there, it's not like breached and so on and so forth. That is the fourth layer. The fifth layer is actually on the network side. So typically, again, the different organizations will have like different types of network, and the data would be stored depending on the like importance of the data. For example, customer data, financial data, probably one of the critical data. So like we might want to store that in a completely in a like a place where it's behind like multiple firewalls, right? So that like, okay, when only like from like a specific organization, especially through their VPN and so on and so forth, that you'll be able to access, and nothing comes through the public network and so on and so forth. And but that's there's a consideration. So depends on what type of data that you're looking at, that could be different types of network configuration that could be considered where you are going to do the access. And while we do that, additional consideration here is also about what we call it the data in motion. That is when I'm accessing it or when I'm like ingesting it, right? During that, like the data in motion as well, the data has to be encrypted. So that also goes without saying that that is also a key element there. And last but not the least is the broader operations part of it, which is where like while we have all these things, whether it is in data center or in cloud, there is also like a completely the CISO organization with the security analysts who are continuously monitoring for any breaches, fraud, and also building the right monitoring systems to ensure that like, okay, all the data are protected. This is actually like the security specialists who are going to be like primarily looking at and driving them. So those are some of the like 6 key layers of how we could approach like to handle like a security solution for a data platform. Of course, what we are achieving is like the privacy and compliance is just one like I said, the tip of the iceberg there, but there is a higher proof of burden of an organization to protect their data beyond those laws, whether it's GDPR or CCP. Yeah. So those are some of the key elements from the security standpoint. Now, quickly shifting gears to the next part of the what, which is going to be like when we are building this data platform, it is also important to kind of keep innovation at the forefront. Excuse me. So when you talk about innovation, like especially like when you're talking about data platforms, and innovation goes hand in hand, and we are at the right decade to even talk about it, right? So here, as you can see, there are two parts of innovation that we are looking at. One part is where the sheer availability of whatever data platform that we are building, how it can enable innovation. That is going to be a first element. Let me give you an example of it, right? When I am building a customer data platform, right? How can I like build a AI and ML model to actually identify customer and unify them? That is like you can build a completely new model to drive it. So there is an opportunity that to innovate based on the platforms that we build. On the other side, there is also huge amount of innovations happening in the data and ML platform themselves, right? Whether like ChatGPT is again a huge example of it, and any of those large like LLMs that we are having, like whether the LLMs or even for that matter like explainability and responsible AI, which I spoke about earlier, those are completely like white spaces right now, where there is an opportunity to make a huge difference as any organization, or as a matter of fact, any professional in kind of like building that. And this is also where like the complete AI governance also comes into place in terms of how well, what kind of regulation that we need to put together, like to ensure that that is there. And as a matter of fact, I think even in US, there has been an executive order that has put in place recently by Biden to ensure that, okay, like there has to be a regulation around the AI governance part. And even in India, like there's been a quite a lot of talk about the deep fakes and so on and so forth, right? So that's again a huge opportunity area that I would say, which if organizations can tap in while they're building the data platforms, that can definitely help them leapfrog in their business areas, right? So that's something which definitely to be considered. And probably last but not the least, I mentioned earlier about while we are building these platforms, it's not that the percentage of you building a new platform is always going to be very, very less. Most of the times it's going to be modernization of the existing platform, right? So while we do that, that element of transformation is an extremely important element while we are building this. What do I mean by the transformation? So one, we spoke about earlier of how interoperable it should be, my like legacy system with my new platform which I am building. But what is much more important is actually ensuring the business continuity, so that there are no disruptions to my business stakeholders, not just in terms of their business as usual stuff, but also in terms of their additional value unlock for their business growth. Because business always looks for, hey, I want to grow this much this year. We cannot never go and say, no, I'm building a new system, you cannot create additional value, we will at least keep you at the steady state. No, we cannot say that. So how do we ensure that we are continuing to help business in their growth, but at the same time transform the platforms? Then the third element, which is again an important element from transformation standpoint, is the change management, right? The change management is probably the biggest thing for an organization. Rather than you can build platforms, you can build products on top of it, but how to ensure that like the stakeholders adopt to like a new system, new products, that is going to be like a key consideration and key challenge that needs to be looked at while we are building these platforms, right? So with that said, I'll probably go to the last part of the key elements, right?
So
So
Vasant,
here, this is a
there was a question on the anonymization.
oh,
Which platform or which backend you recommend for anonymization, and how do you um, decide the anonymization is required for the platform?
So a couple of things, right? So I can give you a couple of examples on that. So first of all, anonymization would be required primarily from the like a compliance standpoint. Let's talk about like a customer data in itself, right? So when we talk about customer data, especially on the marketing side, when I'm going to like, let's talk about I'm marketing through the social media. So whether be it's Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, right? So when the data that is going to come back, definitely like these are like, so some of the social media are the wall gardens, wherein that they would like, as per the compliance laws, we are not going to get any customer information there. We will be able to only get an aggregated information back. So that is one part of it, right? So there will be like, if I have to still like understand my customer behavior in terms of the various marketing channels, whether how the like, where did the customer engage more in terms of the specific marketing channel, whether it is like a affiliate channel, or like social media, or for that matter like a display or retargeting. For me to get that insights, I need that customer behavior information. However, but because of like privacy laws, we will not be able to get that confirm information. This is where we can build something like a data clean rooms, wherein okay, we are getting the data without any PII details, like having only the aggregated information, so that at a segment level, okay, maybe for this geography, okay, I'm able to get some insights in terms of, okay, this has been the engagement. So if I have to spend, where do I spend more money, like which channel I need to spend more money, I can take that this thing in terms of what do you say, well, like the insights from there. So that is one kind of an example where there would be a need for like obfuscation or anonymization of the data, primarily for driving in customer behavior insights on the marketing channel. But because of the compliance, we cannot have the customer data, and like where we'll be able to use it. Now the other example also is also around in terms of like, when we share, for example, as an organization, like I may be a like a bank, or like a CPG organization. I have my customers. I like, if I'm, let's say I'm like, I've gone for a like a buy solution for activation. Again, let me take an example of marketing solution itself, right? Like I have to activate customer through a third party channel, right? Like an Epsilon of the world, right? Then I cannot share my customer details into like a third party vendor. So how do I do that? I have to strip off all the PII information. I can only share something which are absolutely not like anything on PII. Only those things go to the like a third party vendor for potential activation, and which they could use to like activate on their side, right? So those are some of the elements. And again, to in terms of obfuscation, definitely we look at the like the some of the key PII details, right? Like a first name, last name, your email, phone numbers, address. Those are the things that typically gets like stripped off while doing the anonymization, and only the rest of the details that are going to be there.
Thanks, Vasant. Yes, that's. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So quickly getting into the like the last bit, which is around the now that we saw, okay, the why and the who, as well as what I need to build and how do I kind of build it. There is also this element of some of the organizational considerations while we build it, right? So starting from in terms of how do I actually organize myself in terms of like while I'm building this what do you say, the data platforms, right? So first thing foremost is that we have to operate in a two in a box model, wherein it's never, excuse me, led directly by a product manager or an engineering lead. It's always a combined effort in terms of how you're doing. Looks like there's another question. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So yeah, so it's a two in a box model. And secondly, it's also important, depending on a case by case basis, depending on which organization that we are with, we can always look at how to organize our teams while building these platforms. Do we do it in a decentralized, or what we call it like a data mesh, right? By domains, you organize the teams and build this capabilities, or do you want to do it in a centralized fashion, wherein we build everything, then like kind of like handle it as a shared service. Again, based on my experience, what I've seen is that when you are starting to build something new, it's always good to kind of do it in a centralized fashion. But once the platform is maturing, like or at least your minimum valuable product is out there, then slowly start to federate it into individual like domain areas, where then they can further refine and build on top of it. So that's the typical way, at least I have seen. But this is the key consideration why we are going to build that. Second is also in terms of ensuring the whole enterprise is on the same page. When I say the same page, same nomenclature. When I say like a sales metric, everybody should know I'm talking about like overall sales, or I'm talking about sales in digital channel or in a store channel or in a contact center channel, whatever, right? So it's extremely important to create a, what I call it like a semantic layer, right? Which ensures that any metric that we have, any data that we have, that is democratized across the enterprise and everybody understands the same thing. That also gets like further like strengthened by creating like a glossary in terms of data catalog, which could be accessed by any part of an organization in terms of when they're looking at a particular metrics. It's a very, very clearly defined so that there are no confusion there. And last but not the least, the data certification is also an extremely important element for building a successful or an effective platform, wherein we want to ensure that the right quality of data is being accessed and like used upon. Because as we mentioned earlier, data is such a critical resource wherein it's used for strategy and insights. You don't want the organization to look at some incorrect data. So that is where it's important to ensure that there is a clear custodian of a particular data from a, if there is a order data coming in, somebody from the source team, source product team own that, vet it out to say, okay, that is the right product, right data. Similarly, if there is a item data that is coming up, there's somebody from merchandising team owning that, be the custodian of the data and kind of providing the certification, so that like, okay, there's everybody in the organization are looking at like the single view of any data or single view of any metric, right? And then also what is also imperative is that by kind of connecting the dots, right? While we are doing the like building these data platforms, what is extremely important is frequent feedback, right? So there's no need to wait for the complete buildup of the entire platform and various products on top of it to go back to your stakeholder who provided the sponsorship, right? What is, and also like looking at like in terms of this thing. So what is important is as and when we keep building the data platform, however small it is, as long as it is logical and creates a particular value, measure it against the OKRs that we have defined, as well as like demo it, like have the like end customers or your sponsors adopt it on a minimal scale, get valuable feedback, and then incorporate that feedback into your data platform again, so that it can continue to like refine further and so on and so forth, so that at the end of the day you can build a solid platform which is going to create the right value. With that being said, just taking a small example of like a end-to-end journey of a customer data platform, right? So starting with like in terms of the three layers which I mentioned earlier, understanding the why and the who. So it's important to list out the key objectives. So for example, in this case, as a customer data platform, identifying and unifying customer data across multiple siloed touch points to create a single view of customer is a key objective, right? Similarly, like in terms of creating that consistent customer definition across organization will also be a key objective. And also in terms of democratization, and like maybe one other element probably it's not missing here which I'll talk about is also ensuring that there is a data privacy is maintained 100% of the time. That will also be a key objective in here, right? With those objectives in place, okay, what will be the corresponding personas that are getting impacted? In the first view, in terms of having a single view of the customer, like the personas impacted are your like the key executive business stakeholders and operators, and the use case that would correspond to them will be to have like a self-serve customer dashboards and scorecards to drive their day-to-day business. How many new customers are coming in, how many new customers are churning, and how many customers like transacted. So those kind of information that they will want to see in a very like a consolidated fashion. So that's the kind of use case that we may want to cater to. So for that, some of the things that we need to like with these kind of objectives and personas and use cases as your why and the who, the platform to be built, like some of the key elements are, okay, do I kind of build versus buy, like how do I unlock the value for these objectives quickly as well as iteratively? How do I secure the customer data to ensure that it maintains that privacy for 100% of the time? How do I like replace my legacy system into my new system, along with like doing the change management of my various stakeholders, like using my legacy system for their various use cases? Then what are the additional features? Okay, when I'm modernizing my data platform, I don't want to give the same parity capabilities. What are the additional capabilities I can build which will increase the adoption by our end consumers? And last but not the least, it's not about just building the functionalities, but how do I build the culture of innovation? How do I come up with new ideas to create much better and higher scale of value? So those are some of the kind of a summary of something that we just spoke about, to put in a real like an example to say how do we go about kind of build that, right? With that, probably the like I want to end up with, in terms of, I know I'm assuming there is a very wide variety of audience in here, but broadly in terms of like as a typical product manager or a lead engineer or a security engineer, what kind of role each of us can
So,
play?
Vasant, one more question on
Sure.
the technical depth part.
Yes.
So, how the technical depth is built? What is the way to measure the technical depth in the organization?
So one of the things, at least like I'm going back to what I was mentioning earlier around this, what is it? Okay, this is where I would go for, right?
Mm.
So to me, the measure is here, like the principles are very like foundational, right? I need to create value, right? I need to create that value soon enough. So we need to identify what is that inflection point in terms of, from the business standpoint, how late can they wait to create a value? Number one, that's one of the element. Second, purely when I'm building my architecture, I need to ensure that it needs to scale for future, right? Especially when you spoke about earlier around, hey, there will be new, say, like laws that may be coming in. How do I cater to them? So we need to anticipate to a large extent, like what are the framework, what are the design principles I need to keep in my this thing, to ensure that I can better scale for my future, at least for the next 5 years. Because when I'm building something, it needs to last at least for 5 years, right? So those principles. But if I have to apply those principles and I'm building this platform based on the talent and the timeline that I've got, how much, where can I like what do you say? I won't say take a shortcut, but where can I compromise on anything? That's where the tech debt is going to come in, right?
Okay.
So we want to minimize that, but at the same time, the first priority is always the business value,
Mhm.
and when exactly they need it. So
Okay.
based on that, you keep like tracking, okay, what is that potential compromise I have? But at the same time, I should, that the compromise or the trade-off I'm taking from tech debt standpoint, that should be in the trajectory wherein I can quickly remediate when I come to that.
Okay.
And typically what we have done in my past is that, again, in the retail industry, and probably it's applicable for many other industry as well, the Q4 is always a very interesting time period of a year, right? Because that's where the major retail events, your Black Fridays and Thanksgivings, especially in from US standpoint, and of course the Christmas in rest of the world standpoint as well, right? So this is the time at large, the systems will be on freeze. Not many changes will happen. So typically what we tend to do is like focus on like the key capabilities, functionalities in Q1, Q2, Q3. Q4, like rather, let me put it this way. We put it like a 30-70 rule, like 30% tech debt, 70% capability in the first 3 quarters, whereas in the fourth quarter, flip the other way. That is 70% tech debt and 30% functionality. So that like we kind of ensure that we are building a robust system as we go.
Okay.
Yep.
It does not depends upon whether you buy or whether it's a build. It depends.
It is also like, I would say in some cases, think about it, like even if you have bought something, I could qualify that as a tech debt as well, because tomorrow I might want to build it on my own. I just because of a time to market need, I might have gone for a SaaS solution and like got that value delivered. But purely for long-term strategic reasons, I might build it, which might take time, which is okay. But when I build it, then I can replace my like the buy solution. That is also part of the that could be qualified as a tech debt as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
son, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just like the final point wherein like, okay, in terms of like just a kind of a summary in terms of some of the things that we just spoke, like how each of the roles can potentially, like what kind of role that they can play. So as I was mentioning earlier, like it's a two in a box model from product managers and from engineer standpoint. From product managers, the key areas where the participation would be, excuse me, absolutely important is in terms of understanding the business goals, basically the why and the who part of it, right? Defining the personas, use cases, gaining the sponsorship, defining what does success look like, as well as supporting the lead engineer, defining the like a minimum valuable product and what kind of milestones that we are talking about, taking like a conscious decision on the tech debt, where we need to like compromise versus not, and then in terms of measuring the value once the platform is built, as well as keeping that constant communication with the stakeholders and helping them adopt. Those are some of the key roles a product manager would have to play. And from the lead engineer standpoint, of course, like it's extremely imperative for them to understand the goals and the use cases and OKR, so that like they can build the solution accordingly. In addition, also need to understand the tech landscape, define the various non-functional requirements, including like the security element of it, evaluate the build versus buy, definitely inclined towards innovate, as well as actually doing the design and the build solution for speed and scale, right? And of course, from the security engineer standpoint as well, extremely important to understand the like business goals and the use cases, so that to even there will be cases where you need to provide the right decision in terms of like trade-offs between, hey, do I need to do a reCAPTCHA in this case versus it's okay for like a customer to do the failure when they are logging in a system, totally depending on how critical that the system is all about, right? So it's important for them also to understand the broader business goals and the use cases that the stakeholders would be involved in, so that they need to be engaged right from day one. It's not like a afterthought engaging a security team member. They should be very much part of the conversation right from day one when we are building it, so that they understand the business needs as well as understand the current landscape, help also like in the buy versus build like determination, especially around the data sensitivity part of it, ensure and evaluate against the regulation and provide the right like security requirements around it, assess the security architecture by the type of data that the platform is holding and handling, as well as continue to keep performing tests and both be it penetration test or like can monitor the same. So like those are some of the key elements like that probably needs to have in mind while we are talking about like building a data platform. So with that, I kind of conclude. I know like we have probably like 10 minutes or so left, I believe. Okay, 6 minutes left. I know like we did take some of the questions in between, but hope this was helpful, and like I'm happy to take any additional questions or like right now or even offline.
There is a question in the QA, and is there any action in order? Okay, that's for us. Okay, Sridhar, yeah. So probably if you are asking about CP credit, we will try to upload in the in your in the portal, ISACA portal, and you will able to get it. So we will start doing that. The tool is ready. We will do the CP upload for all of those who are attend the session. Other question, Vasant, for you, PBD, privacy by design, and the product lens is going hand in hand, or it's a separate,
Sorry, come again, Raj. I think I missed the question.
privacy by design and the product lens. Okay, so is it go hand in hand?
Absolutely. I think, see, like privacy by design to me is a kind of a subset of looking at a product lens. Because purely when I talk about product lens, it's about keeping my end consumers at the heart of everything, right? What is the value? Like purely, what do I need to like achieve as part of my end customers? So implicitly, as part of that, privacy is very much part of that.
Okay.
Right. So because at the end of the day, it's not about, okay, how am I storing the data? That is a secondary thing. What is important for my customer? Like ensuring that the right data privacy is in place is very much part of the product lens that we talk about.
The last one, is there any product you are going to use as a product lens, or is it a process?
It is absolutely a process, right? So when we talk about product, it is like we are talking about the product craft, basically, right? So that's where like when you talk about like the product managers or product owners, those are the roles which actually play that capability. Basically, like who are going to drive and applying that product lens to come up with the right what do you say, the requirements and the right products, basically.
Thanks, Vasant. Okay, so I'm just flashing the survey for Vasant session. Please do your survey. You can go to Mindy.com, then you type 6672 72280, or we already pasted the link. You can directly go to the link and give the feedback on this session. Yeah. So other one is about which we told about our review classes, which you follow our social medias. The next today we started with the CGIT. Next week we are going to start with the CISM. Somebody has asked about having the class for some of the organization. We are allowed to do that. Please send your query to chapter@isakabangalore.org. And somebody also asked about how to claim the CP. Is very easy. Either you log in to your Isaka portal, and then you can go to the CPE session and you can claim. For this session, definitely we will able to upload it and you will able to see in your login. We will be start doing that from now onwards. Yeah. So thank you for that. So a quick closure remark. To Vasant, it was the session was prudent and insightful from your side. It was. I would like to give a virtual applause to this excellent session, and thank you, Vasant. And I know it was one of the different session which we have. Definitely, it's a mix of security and the product. Normally, our session is mainly focusing on the security aspect. Today, this session giving detail about like what you said about privacy by design, security by design from a business point of view. You talk about OKRs and the CISO and CEO and the business stakeholders OKRs as well. And the one thing which key takeaway is the 7 V's, 7 V's and their importance from architecting the effective platform and securing the future. It's beautifully explained. And somebody I saw in the comment that you are a great narrator. So very good to see that comment from all of our members. And it was extremely engaging and collaborative. So the amount of information conveyed in last 2 hours was immense. It's all related to the work we do from the architecture and effective platform. I believe 130 plus members who joined and was there from the beginning for last 2 hours, a fantastic session. Not the least, I want to thank you for all the members who have attended this session. And I hope you have some key takeaway from this session. Mostly we will have one more session probably for this month. Mostly it will be next week on the ESG audit. Some of the 2 CEOs from the Aspire organization willing to take this session. I will be sending the session detail for the next week. Till then, stay tuned. Thank you for joining. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
opportunity.
And Vasant, we normally give a token of appreciation from ISACA. We will be sending to your residence address very soon. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.